Hello everyone, it's day 6 of the World Championship title match between world champion Ding Lejeune and the current young Indian prodigy, the challenger, Gukesh the Maraju himself. Ding played with white today, and Gukesh had to defend with black. Another interesting fight. So before we jump to the game, real quick information about the Chessify platform, a great tool for any level of chess player to get better, to analyze your openings, work on your preparations, and so on. So using promo code MESHKOVS20, you can get 20% discount for the first purchase, and you can check the link in the description. Let's go. In today's game, Ding played with white and he started with a d-pawn, d2, d4. Gukesh plays knight f6, bishop f4, d5, and e3. And that's a London system from Ding. It's not the first time he plays it in the World Championship title matches. For instance, 1.5 years ago when he had to face Nepomniachtchi, he also played London system in the same 6th round. So it all goes circles. And Gukesh replied with e6, knight f3, c5, c3, and knight d6, bishop d6, sorry. So bishop d6 is not the very main move. Apart from that, usually black starts with knight c6, white plays knight bd2, bishop d6, sort of trying to trade dark square bishops. Usually bishop retreats to g3, and after short castle, black plays short castle and bishop d3. And yeah, it's ocean of theory starts here. Black has a lot of options to proceed. So instead of going to this tabia, Gukesh after c3 decided to play bishop d6, and it's quite interesting to know the details, and it's somewhat similar to the previous game where Ding also avoided to face some theoretical lines, and he pretty much deviated from the theoretical discussions very early, and tried to get a very positional fight without too much direct theory. And here, also after bishop d6, there are a couple of options to proceed for white. So first of all, the move that the world champion played here is bishop b5, hitting the king. But it's interesting to compare. For instance, if we go bishop g3, the same reaction that I've shown earlier in the main line after knight c6. Let's say black plays short castle, knight bd2, and queen c7. So if white does the same thing and pretty much brings all the minor pieces into the game, then the point of postponing knight development from b8 is to go knight bd7. And in this case, knight is slightly better placed. It's better coordinated with dark square bishop and the queen on c7. And the main point is that pawn on c5 is protected by everyone, and white can't use this pin by taking on c5 at any moment. So there are some small details, and pretty much the point of going into such a line is that maybe your opponent did not recheck briefly some of the London theoretical ideas, and maybe one day it could work. So apart from that, after bishop d6, there is also knight bd2. Quite an interesting try. Let's say if black just continues and stick with their plan, let's say short castle bishop d3, if you go queen c7 here, then it's actually quite a trick, because in this case white managed not to waste tempo on bishop g3, and they just simply trade and play knight e5. It would be all good if after b6 black would have time to play bishop a6 and trade light square bishops, but unfortunately white can play queen e2, and yeah, black is sort of under unpleasant pressure because of the light square bishop being stuck behind the wall of pawns. And this is actually position from my game. I played last year in Bundesliga against Gupta, a strong Indian grandmaster, and I lost the game. So yeah, this is something to play for. And usually black tries to, instead of queen c7, they try to go for bishop f4, ef4, and then sort of trade and play either queen c7 followed by e5, or queen b6 followed by knight c6. But for instance, this game happened in a game between Nihal Sarin and champion himself, Ding Lezhang, 2 years ago in Speed Chess Championship, where they got IQP type of position, where white has a little bit an advantage, I would say. So going back to the critical position in the opening, after bishop d6, Ding decided to play bishop b5, throwing a check and pretty much forcing an advance, because the only way how to protect the king is to play knight c6. And then he pretty much trades everything. Trades on c6, trades on d6, and then white plays queen a4. This is a key idea. You want to relocate your queen to a3 and try to use the pin along the a3, f8 diagonal. So Gukesh played castle here, and if black tries to get rid of the double pawns immediately with cd4, it's actually quite a problem for them, because white can capture cd4 and after short castle play knight bd2. So there is an idea to have this positional grip where, once again, bishop on c8 could become a huge problem, huge issue, strategic problem that you're just out playing without a piece. So the only option how to prevent that is apparently to go c5 immediately. And you have to either calculate or know that after queen a3 there's this annoying pin, and the best what you can do is to voluntarily give up the pawn. But come on, it's not so easy to make such a decision over the board if you did not study such a position. So the point is, yeah, that after queen a6, bishop a6, white's king is sort of stuck for a moment, and black has both options to bring their rooks to the semi-open files, where they have full compensation for that c5 pawn. So it's interesting strategic battle in the early game, and yeah, I have to say that both players played very quickly at this point, and short castle was played here. So queen a3 followed, obviously, as it should. And after queen a3, Gukesh almost instantly, I think, played knight e4, supporting the pawn on c5. So here there's another detail that white plays knight d2, but which knight? Any normal player who sees this position for the first time probably tries to play knight bd2. But in this case, it's actually not precise from the white side, and black is completely fine, because it's at the same time strategic battle, and at some point it gets very move by move, very concrete approach. So like black can capture on d4, and after trade on d6, cd4, it seems that once again white has this knight b3, knight c5 plan, but black can start with rook b8, hitting the pawn on b2, and if you play b3, then once again I play bishop a6 with a similar motive, then I play rook c8, and most likely c5, and black is completely fine. But you know, it works only because of the very precise approach. So for that reason, after knight e4, you have to go for knight fd2. Also, like in some openings, this idea is quite common, but not always. So now the point, if we compare after cd4, the difference is that white can capture on e4, and black has to trade queens. So after de, we capture pawn back, and black has huge strategic issues with their pawns in the center and on the queen side. Yeah, so pretty much you see that we can conclude that pretty much after every single move there is some small strategic trap, and that's how you try to outplay your opponent on a 2800 level. But yeah, after knight fd2, it seems that Gukesh was very familiar with the structure and position and line and pretty much everything. And he plays e5, a very energetic move, and that's also the drawback of knight fd2, because knight is not anymore controlling the e5 square. So, okay. White takes on e4, takes, queen c5, and once again a very precise move, queen g6, looking for a counterplay on the king side, hitting the g2 pawn, and also white is still underdeveloped, so you have to give up the pawn and play for the development. So after queen takes g2, Dink makes long castle. Also, I wanted to mention that knight d2, this position still happened in practice like 5 times. I was quite surprised, but it's not like it's still nothing new. So for instance, last year, Nijat Abasov had this game against Rasmus Svane in a Polish league, and Rasmus made a mistake here, or inaccuracy. He took on d4, and yeah, now black got some issues with that e4 pawn, so he tried to, you know, protect it for a moment and then deflag the queen, but yeah, pretty much position collapsed very quickly, because he made another strategic or even tactical mistake, because after queen a6, there is a knight e4 and some back rank issues. So after queen a2, Nijat just traded queens and, you know, pretty much got a winning position and converted it smoothly. So a couple of other games happened as well, like in US Championship a few years ago, and one more, but yeah, that's how it is. So it's not a completely new position yet, and Gukesh follows the footsteps, so he plays queen g2, and it's also not a novelty. Dink plays long castle. At this point, black is under serious strategic pressure on the king side, and some potential ideas like rook g1, maybe even rook g7 at some point, because you know, there could be some issues with the king. So queen f2 is also pretty much the only move, and Dink takes on e5. So believe me or not, but this is still not anything new. At this point, we can just conclude that position is quite messy. It's clearly a 3-result game because, the pawn structure is very much different from what we have seen yesterday, for instance, where it was all balanced and symmetrical, and pretty much nothing happened, and no one was in danger. But in this case, opposite castling, first of all. Secondly, we have some double pawns and isolated pawns, and also some open files, and it seemed like a very, very sharp fight, at least at this point. So Gukesh tries to find some activity on the b file, and also he protects this way the e4 pawn, because now it's untouchable because of mate in 1. And so knight c4 was played by Ding, and bishop e6, the move that Gukesh played here, was a novelty, move 17. So I was surprised to see that 2 correspondence chess players still had the same position a couple of years before, in 2022, and but the game finished in 1 move. So after queen f3 and rook hf1, they just agreed to a draw for whatever reason. But yeah, still, maybe it's also worth mentioning that that's something that chess players or chess coaches uses a lot. These correspondence chess players databases, because the depth of working on chess in correspondence chess is much higher, and immersion is much deeper. People works with the engine pretty much constantly, and they have pretty much perfect games, and also work on the opening lines very carefully, trying to outplay your opponent, even though you're playing almost against the engine, which is interesting. Anyways, let's go back. So bishop e6 was played in the game, and at this point, Ding just plays rook d2, chases the queen away, brings his second rook to the action, and after a trade on c4, we get major piece middle game with a complicated fight. So Gukesh went for e5 pawn, while Ding collected the c6, and we get this sort of sharp fight. So we can say that the nutshell of this position is a race, and the point is that White has pawn majority on the queen side, while Ding has majority on the queen side, and Gukesh has majority on the king side. So probably the question is, if you manage to trade queens, first of all, then it should be all about who first starts to push his pawns further. And in the game, Ding tried to trade queens. Black, of course, avoids that thing, because in case they trade, most likely pawns on the queen side going to run a little bit faster together with the king. And so they start to play this game, catch me if you can. So he can't. And after queen d5, queen e7, queen d6, they're repeating position, and Ding sort of plays queen d5 for the 3rd time. So after queen e7, it would be a 3-fold repetition, and a draw would be agreed. But in this moment, Gukesh plays queen h4 and declines an official draw offer. In a post-game interview conference, journalists asked him why he did so, And yeah, the reply was quite simple. He said that I just want to make a couple of moves more and see what happens, which makes sense, because it's pretty hard to evaluate what's going on here. It's pretty messy, and the only thing what we can say is that probably White has a little bit of an advantage because they're controlling everything. So, pretty much this rook on d2 supports all the pawns, and also White controls the d file, the only open file on the board. So Queen also probably slightly better placed, but the thing is, there is no direct way of making a progress, because if you try to push these pawns as far as possible, as quick as possible, then you can end up just having open king, and with all the major pieces on the board, it could be game over pretty easily. So you have to you have this clear approach what you have to do, but you can't do this immediately, and you have to prepare and keep the tension and wait for the right moment, to strike. So Gukesh plays g6, White plays queen e5, the move that many commentators during the live coverage were quite disappointed about, because c4 probably was a bit better, with the idea to play b3, solidify the pawn structure, and you made this small step on the queen side, you advanced a little bit, then probably you make another small improvement with king b1 or king b2, then maybe you can relocate your rook, like rook c2, rook d4, and then like try to squeeze and maybe then push pawns a little bit further. So that would be the moment to make this step further. But for whatever reason, Dink plays queen e5, and after rook b8, he goes back. So once again, they're it's a second round of Catch Me If You Can. Once again, queen h5, queen f4, then Gukesh swings his queen to the second, to the other part of the board. A3 plate just protects the pawn, queen b5. White attacks the e4 pawn, and Gukesh looks for a counterplay with a queen e2, maybe a bit unpleasant. But still, rook 1 to d2 and queen f3. So after Gukesh made this move, it's another key moment of the game, I would say, because at this point, it's very essential to know that it's move 33. So still, you need to make 7 moves, which is maybe not so much, but still, it's 7 moves, and the time difference was quite significant, because Dink had 25 minutes at this point, while Gukesh was down to 12. And objectively, White is better, but they need to find this precise move. Only one move gave an advantage. And after wasting, I would even say, after burning all the extra time Dink had at this point, he made quite imprecise move, king c2, and after that move, he never had real chances to fight for the advantage. So apart from king c2, a couple of options were possible. So for instance, if White would play queen h6, to keep the king in the cage, and maybe then play king c2 and then advance queenside pawns, then rook e5 would be a very unpleasant way to play, because rook h5 is in the air, then suddenly black gets some counter chances on the 5th rank, and it would be quite almost balanced. So the right move was queen g5. With queen g5, you're still controlling e5 square, you're supporting the e3 pawn, you're controlling g-file, and also keeping an eye on the d8 square. So this place for the queen would be perfect, and white would keep slight advantage. But yeah, after king c2, it all led to trades and f5. So in a similar fashion, in a previous game, Ding got an advantage with black. If you remember, after that, knight c4 takes, and then there was a supported passed pawn on d3. In this case, there is a supported passed pawn on e4. And yeah, it's still quite interesting what happened next, because it's move 35. They were down to some 10 minutes, and white plays h4 here. So the point why he plays this move, for instance, let's imagine that Ding would try to go rook d7 to collect the a7 pawn, but in this case, black could try to generate some counterplay on the king side with a very direct approach, g5. And the point of this move is that if you take the pawn, then these pawns are completely unstoppable, e3, f4, and that's pretty much the end of the game. Pawns running down to the board. So h4 was a good prophylaxis to take control over the g5 square, and I was quite surprised with e3 move, because okay, white has to play rook e2, but after that, king comes closer, and you sort of having this pawn on e3 very vulnerable. But it turns out that there was quite an idea from the white side, from the black side. If white, for instance, plays c4, that did not happen in the game, then king eventually had this interesting route to go king h6, and then enter the white's part of the field with king h5, g4, and f3 maneuver. So Ding decided to prevent this with very energetic play h5 here. So the point is that if you are trying to do the same thing with king g7, then I trade, I push c pawn, for instance, and as soon as you go king h6, I stop you. I just shut the door. You have to go back, and then I go back as well. And this probably would lead to another repetition. But yeah, after h5, once again, Gukesh surprised many spectators by capturing on h5 on move 39, and on move 40, Ding plays rook d5, just stands up and leaves the hole. And yeah, Ding was down to 5 minutes, and Gukesh had 3 minutes only to make his last decision, but he pushed h4 pawn, and it seemed to be like a very sharp ending where still anything could happen and everything is possible, but in reality it's just very, very drawish. And the point is that after rook f5, they got half an hour, both players had some time to calculate lines, and Gukesh just attacked the king, so Ding had to go back. And after he retreated, king came closer to g7, and yeah, pretty much this was the end of the game. So I'll show you first why they agreed to repeat the position. Because if, for instance, white tries to be greedy and turn on this pawn grabber mode, to get this pawn on h4, it could be really, really unpleasant for white, because it's not about the quality of the pawns or quantity of the pawns. It's about the activity always, and especially about the king's activity in the rook, almost any rook ending. So rook takes h4, and then king enters the field to f5, and then probably e4, f3. So it could be very, very unpleasant. So I'm very sure that both of them saw such an option. And for instance, if you try to play rook e5, then apparently you just lose the game by force. So this loses on the spot after taking and rook d2. You have to trade rooks, and this h-pawn becomes a hero and runs to the promotion square. So after calculating everything, it turns out that there are no options to play. So Ding just gave check. King had to retreat, and they repeated the position 3 times and agreed to a draw. A solid game. The score in the match still is leveled, 3-3 after 6 games. Tomorrow we have a rest day, and see you the day after tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention. See you soon.